Hello and welcome to Treasure in Every Verse. I'm your host, author and Bible teacher Kevin Madison. Thank you for joining us today. Okay, folks, look, we're going to jump right back into this, and we're doing the 15 foundations for proper Bible study. So we're right here. Last time we did uh, number 11, basically this one right here. The Bible is the best commentary on the Bible. We finished that off last time. We're going to get into this one right here. Never lift the verse out of its context. Folks, context is key. So what do I mean by context? I don't necessarily mean just the verses immediately preceding or immediately succeeding. Because the Bible is remove all the chapters and verses, remove all the names of the books. Okay? So when I say context, we know that God is a spirit. So when you read everything about Jesus Christ in the physical, even though he's God, you have to understand both both ways. And it's not just given to you in the New Testament, it's also given to you in the Old Testament. So you have to apply doctrine as well as the verses that precede a specific verse. For example, if you just got a verse of scripture and you just pick one wherever I'm at, right? So this is Philippians chapter 2. Well, what I mean by context, I don't mean let's read verse 5 and then you say, okay, verse 5 have just what's before it, verse 1 through 4, and the immediate 4 verses that comes after it, verses 6 through 10. That's that is proper, but that's not all, folks. Because when I say proper context, this gets into who God is. This right here, this verse right here, in this section from verse 5 all the way down to verse 12, it starts talking about Jesus Christ. But listen, look at what it does. That he was in the form of God. Where do you get that from? Well, that don't come in the verses before it or immediately following it. That comes from the Old Testament and other books that Paul had written before it. So within this context, you can't have verses disagreeing with this and you saying that's what this mean because the context, the immediate context takes you there. No, you got to have doctrine as well. So then you go this bond servant thing, right? And then this found in appearance of a man, and then this one right here. He humbled himself. Where you seen that at? All this different things. This comes out of Exodus, Leviticus, and Deuteronomy. This bondservant thing. This comes out of the Psalms. So when I say context, I mean the entire Bible doctrine in the Bible. So not just the verses before and after. That's extremely important. You have to have that as well. But you have to have doctrinal background as well. Where did you find this at? This is coming out of Daniel. This is coming out of Leviticus primarily, and Exodus, and Deuteronomy. The bondservant part. In the form of God comes out of Genesis. Okay. It also comes out of the Psalms. And it also comes out of, was it Deuteronomy? Either Deuteronomy or Leviticus. So that's what I'm talking about. I mean, obviously, where Christ come at the man, you start looking at Isaiah, you start looking at the Psalms, you start looking at Zechariah. I mean, you start looking at all those particular chapters when you start talking about the man Jesus Christ. He isn't named, but they're talking about him arriving on the earth. Isaiah prophesied that he's going to come as a man. So that's when I'm talking this again. This is point blank Psalm 113. I mean, there's absolute no doubt where that comes from. So what am I saying when I say take it within this context? There's two things primarily, right? There's immediate, do that. Immediate text, okay? Verses before, verses after. Then you have doctrine. Everything in the Bible that help you understand because it's connected to all those verses, just like I did to you before. But the problem is, if you hadn't read all those books that I made reference to, then you're not going to know that. And you can misapply, even within this immediate text, you can misapply what humbled himself means if you hadn't read the Psalms. This right here gives you an idea, but the Psalms really clears it up for you. Same thing about this bondservant thing. What is that? Really, folks, this is slaves. Slave. That's what bondservant means. Everywhere you see in the Bible bondservant, folks, it means slave. The people who translated it just softened it up. They said that slave was offensive, but guess what? They didn't translate it bondservant when it say we were slaves to sin. Why didn't they say bondservant to sin? It's the same word. It's slave, folks. So where do you get this from? This comes out of the Old Testament, straight out of the first 5 books of the Bible. So that's what I'm talking about when I say immediate text as one, but you also must apply the doctrine test. What is the doctrine test? I've showed you this triangle several times, so you should be used to it and familiar with it by now. Here's the doctrinal test, right? So you go this right here. Got it? All right. Now, here it is. You got all verses coming down on this one point. And then the wrong way to do it is to have all verses or this one text. This is one text coming down all verses. That's wrong. So let's look at it. So this is wrong. This is correct. Okay, so that's what I mean when I say that's how you're supposed to apply doctrine. You can't have one little verse that you pulled out of its context and fails the doctrine test and push it down and make everything else relevant. No, you got to have all the verses agreeing and converting here on this one text. That's the right way to apply. All right,